What's up, everyone, and welcome to I guess this is going to be a review video. Anyway, we decided to take a look at two different STL create your own character makers. One is Hero Forge and the other one is Eldritch Foundry. Hero Forge I'm familiar with a lot. I've actually played around with this thing quite a bit. I've created a bunch of characters. I printed some. I know the ins and outs and I know the pitfalls. I know the pros and cons of using the Hero Forge platform. For the most part, it's actually a really nice platform. It works really well. It's pretty smooth. It doesn't seem to bog the browser down too much when you're working on the characters. You can save them. You can purchase them as physical print files. You can purchase them painted. You can purchase them as STLs. So there's a lot of options as far as what you might be looking for in a create your own character kind of platform. There are options for different heads. You have different face styles. You can swap the face styles. It also allows you to kind of combine different things. Like, for example, we can take an animal head and put it on this character that not really supposed to have an animal head. And it'll look kind of funny, obviously, but you have so much freedom with these tools, which is one of the reasons why I like Hero Forge and platforms like it. But one of the things that there are some cons to using the Hero Forge platform, and now mind you, I have never actually physically ordered physical print files from these folks, nor would I, because I don't really have the need to. But there are some cons when it comes time to actually get your files, and we'll touch over that in a little bit. For now, I'm just going to go over the different assets that you can use, and I'm going to go over the platform as verbosely as possible because there's a lot here. There's tons of races you can pick through. There's tons of faces, heads, ear types you can swap in. You can change the horns on their head. You can give them tails, wings, armor, weapons, and all kinds of accessories that they can literally clip on and hang pretty much anywhere. And it's a very cool platform if you're looking to make your own custom characters, especially if you've got like a D&D session planned and you've just made up a character and you're like, you know what, I want them to look like this, and these are the details, and this is the race, and blah blah blah. And then you can kind of put that together. And even if you're just looking to get a digital file, like a place marker file, like if you play digital D&D online, you can use them for this as well. So it's versatile as far as that goes, and I do like that. There are some things you can't do with it. There's some limitations, like once you create a very large character, or they call them XLs, they can't be on mounts. That's one deficiency there. There are some things that tend to, I don't want to say, they kind of go through each other. You'll find that when you put different pieces of armor on, or you start mixing things together, they don't always blend 100% perfectly. So there are times where you're going to see the meshes will collide, and the program, the software is not going to tell you, oh, this mesh is colliding, this is going to look bad. You just kind of have to figure that out. You kind of have to look at the model. I mean, kind of take a look at the way these horns here are interfacing with her hair. It doesn't really look fully natural in the front. There's kind of like that weird bit that the horn just kind of sticking through and the hair just kind of looks like it's flowing through it. So again, not the most natural appearance there. And we'll go over some of the other fine details as well as we kind of go through each step of the system. Like, for example, you can swap out the torsos, as I'm doing here. And there's a lot of cool options for that as well. As you can see here, you can go through different hand types. You can go through different limb types. You can remove a limb if you want. If you want to make your character an amputee, you can remove an entire arm. You can go up to the elbow. I believe you can just remove the hand. There's all sorts of options. And, it's great that they offer all these different options because you really can go absolutely crazy with customizing these things. But again, limitations. Some of them don't blend well together. Some of them just don't look good together. So, those are things you kind of have to test and try and kind of look at and then kind of go over and test again. And we'll go over that a bit more when we take a look at one of the models that I've actually already exported out of Hero Forge a little bit later on in the video. As you kind of go through the Hero Forge tool, you're going to find all sorts of fun things to play around with. There's different types of bottoms. You can make your character into a snake person, centaur, robot. Really all depends on what you're fancying that day. And like I said, there aren't a lot of restrictions until you start getting into some of the sizing. And the XL stuff does have issues with mounts. The XL pieces also require bigger bases in most cases. Yeah, you can remove their legs too. I guess if you wanted like a disembodied person. That's an option. So, when you're pushing through this and you find that, you finally made your character, you want to export them, you're ready to go, rock and roll time, it's very easy to do so. But there are, again, so many different options with this. You could play with this for days. There are height sliders. There is a head size slider. You have, you can add weight to the arms, the upper body, the lower body. You can adjust the posture. You can create the build, which is like their musculature. And again, depending on what you're using it for, whether or not you're going to use it for actual tabletop or whether you're going to use it as a collectible, Hero Forge is pretty cool when it comes to the level of options. And I've explored this quite a lot. They have new stuff coming out almost every month. And they even have some pre-made, I believe, digital files that are available each month as well, that you can purchase too. So there is those as well, in case you don't really have a creative side and you don't want to make them yourself. Although I highly recommend playing around with it because it's really not hard to use, and you can, again, pretty much make the character you're wanting to make. Imagination is up to you. So again, I'm going to go through the different parts of the program here, and as you are checking this out, I will give some commentary on the different areas that we're playing around with. So like this here that we're doing is the body adjustment, and as you can see, you can give her a bigger butt, you can increase the chest size, you can increase the curves. There's a lot of options. You also have wings, which you can add to the characters, and all different kinds. Big old dragon wings if you want. And these all, I believe, every set of wings will make the character an XL character, because it does make them a bit taller and a bit larger off the plate. Especially if you've already made them tall to begin with, this is just going to increase that even more. So you are going to wind up with a pretty big piece once you add things like wings, weapons, maybe increase their height a little bit, that sort of thing. And yeah, you're going to find that, okay, this is much bigger. Now, some of the wings, like there are some smaller ones that I believe do not change it to an XL. But they, obviously there's going to be some overhang. And this is where I tell people, okay, most of your meshes where they're blending together are going to come from things on the character's back, the character's shoulders, or weapons. Because what I talked about before, where the meshes will tend to kind of like go through each other, like I pointed out with the horns and the way that kind of has an effect on the hair. And although I didn't change it, because I kind of left it there as a reminder as to, yes, this can happen. You will have to deal with that possibility. You can change their tails, as we're showing here. You can even increase the tail count. So for example, if you wanted a 9-tailed fox, you could totally have a 9-tailed fox. If you want 2 tails, you can have 2 tails. You want 4 tails, you can have 4 tails. Now, obviously, the more tails you have, the more cumbersome that's going to be to print back there. So keep that in mind whenever you're designing a character. Don't go crazy. You're still going to have to manage to print these things, and the more stuff you have hanging off the back and the more things you have overhanging in different areas, the more complicated you're going to make that print. Yes, it's probably going to look super cool. But again, just be conscious of the fact that you are adding detail, and these are details that you're going to have to support. the files from Hero Forge do not come pre-supported, so you will need to support these yourself. And I highly recommend when you do purchase the digital files that you purchase them with the bases separated. They do give you the option of doing both, and although Hero Forge actually recommends joining them because they're concerned that the meshes, like your model, won't actually mesh to the bottom, like you'll wind up with a gap, or the feet won't have a place to plant, and so essentially you're going to either wind up having to do finishing, or you're going to have to wind up taking them into a 3D program of your own to modify the digital files a bit in order to make sure that they mesh and they fit. Now, we're moving on to the clothing here, and as you can see, you can the owl helmet, I love that one. You can put all sorts of stuff on your character's head. Now, helmets like this, as again, this is another example of just bad mesh kind of going, like you put a helmet on, and all of a sudden, you have a helmet with horns. Because, I don't know, I guess instead of making it look like there were holes in the helmet, the horns just kind of poke through the helmet. And in my opinion, it looks bad. Because now it doesn't look like my character has horns, now it just looks like my helmet has horns. You wouldn't really know the difference if you were looking at this. You'd be like, oh, this is a horned helmet, that's cool. Kind of. I mean, the 3D elements kind of sort of blur together there pretty well. There's a little bit of a tiny glitch there on the left side. So, yeah, just, again, these are things to be conscious of. I tend to go with outfits that do not have helmets, unless I am completely not really caring about the character's face. And then in which case, I'll just cover up their face completely. Masks and stuff like that are pretty cool. You know, you can use those. Those won't have much effect on the top of your head. But again, just be conscious of that because you're going to want to make sure that whatever you're combining here, whatever you're adding to the character, isn't going to either collide with the other areas, like this pauldron on the back here is colliding with the hair and a bit of that little cape scarf thing that you're wearing. So that's just an example there. And of course, you could probably knock that off and say, it's just the way they're moving. It's behind it, or it's in the fur. You just can't see it. To be honest, that drives me crazy. And that mask there also collides with the ear. So you have two issues there where you have collisions happening inside the, where the meshes and the 3D objects are colliding with each other. And this is, it's a common issue I've seen with some of these character creators like this. And you tend to just, you either overlook it or you try to make adjustments as much as possible to make sure that the collisions don't happen. Again, another example with these pauldrons, you can see they kind of like go through the other mesh. Again, with these, same thing. You're going to find this issue is incredibly common while using the Hero Forge platform. I'm not saying this is incredibly terrible. This is about, in my opinion, it doesn't really rank them down too much. As long as you're aware of it and you know that you have to look out for this collision issue, you'll be able to catch those things and you'll be able to fix them. Or you'll just remove the item or move it around or something in a way that it does not collide in any weird or unnatural way. And it's a shame, too, because some of the really ornate stuff has the biggest collision issues because it has all this stuff kind of hanging off of it. And, it's either going to, you're going to have that overlap. I believe I had a character, one of my earlier characters I created, literally had an axe that actually went through one of her pauldrons. The entire staff of the axe, the handle there, just went right through a pauldron. Didn't realize it while I was creating the character. Bought the darn thing, printed it even, and I was like, wait, I didn't even see this? Are you kidding me? Now we're going back ages ago here that I did that, and since then I have learned that there is definitely some problems with collision, and so you do have to just be conscious of that. Like I said, the options with the weapons, the options with everything else is great, as long as you are aware that you might need to move them around a bit to prevent or just fix these collision issues. Capes will also cause collision problems, where they will just kind of go through objects. They'll go through part of an object. They'll cut through an arm. things like that, and you need to be careful about it because you're going to wind up getting this file, and if you're not conscious of it, you don't look for it, you're going to buy it, and then you're going to go, oh crud, my elbow's going through my cape. Darn, why didn't I see that? Well, here you go, guys. I'm warning you. All right, so you've been warned. Just keep that in mind. Make sure that you look for these collision issues. I mean, probably one of the few objects you won't have those problems with might be a ring or some other minor accessories like earrings. But then you might still have collision problems with that too because of the proximity of everything in that area. Like, for example, if we had an earring, it's definitely going to collide with the mask. It's going to try to go right through it almost because of its proximity to the bottom of the ear. And where that mask is kind of already colliding with it anyway. And then, of course, you have your poses, which, pretty much standard poses. Sitting, running, kicking, different gestures. There's one that looks like they're kind of like, I don't know, ready to take off. There's one or two, I believe, that have the character up on 1 foot, which I absolutely hate unbalanced characters like that when they're up on 1 foot. But some of them are pretty cool. I will, definitely take that. Some of them work, some of them don't. Some of the poses are really cool, and then of course, if you don't want any of the default poses, if you don't want to use them as they are, you don't have to. You can actually go to the Advanced tab in the posing section, and you can then kind of move each particular body part. And like I said, you're going to want to go there anyway, and you're going to want to change and move around some of the effects that are on the character if it allows you to. Not everything is 100% adjustable. Not everything has the ability to be moved around. There are some objects that I believe are static. And I have run into that issue before where you just can't move, or you can move it, but the range of movement is really limited. Like, for example, something you put on your character's back, I believe you only have the ability to kind of like move it in, out, and backwards and forwards. Whereas, you may want to, I don't know, move it into a different direction. I'm not sure what else you'd want to do with it, but again, some things are limited in their ranges of motion. Once you start putting weapons in your character's hands, they start to get fleshed out a little bit, looking pretty cool. Again, this is something that could take you hours. You could literally play with this editor for hours. Just make sure that you save your characters in your account so they don't get wiped if you happen to have your browser crash or something like that. And I recommend saving as often as possible, as this will definitely save you some heartache in the future if you've had any issues with crashing. Now again, different weapons, different stances. You can change the stances continuously. And again, you can go back into the pose menu. You can either pick a default stance, like I said, or you can go to the advanced system, and then you can start tweaking the different body parts in the directions you'd like to see them go. And yeah, you can make them completely unnatural. You could make it look like your arm's completely broken or just in a really weird, awkward position. And I mean, I don't know, maybe you want to do that. There might be a reason for it. Personally, I've never done that. I played around with it before just to kind of see how far you could bend the limbs. There's one of the one-footed positions I was talking about. Now that one, I would probably pin down the tail and the foot, so at least you'd have two things that were touching your base. But as you can see, the tail needs to be adjusted because it's actually kind of blurring through the base a little bit there on the bottom. So you want to make sure when you go to your advanced tab, you can click on the tail, and then what we can do is we can just lift it up a little bit by going to the twist and bringing it up backwards just a little bit there to remove it from touching the base. So now it's not quite touching it. Now, of course, when you actually print this character, you can lean her back a little bit so the tail does touch the base, but you're going to give yourself about that maybe 1 or 2 millimeter room there, so that way you have a little bit of wiggle to make sure that the character is going to fit. And again, just take a really good look, make sure that you don't have any meshing issues. Now again, look at the hair. This is something I left on there intentionally. Now we can go and change this now, but the hair is actually going right through that piece of clothing on the neck. So if we change this to, like, say, a shorter haircut, you're going to notice it. Obviously, it's not going to bleed through the neck, but depending on what the kind of hairdo you want, you may still have some minor collision problems there on the bottom. I find that ponytails work pretty good if you want to keep them away from the clothes. Bob haircuts, short haircuts, pixie cuts, that sort of stuff tend to be a little bit easier because you don't have to worry about them kind of blending through half of the outfit that they're wearing. But as you can see, even this short haircut kind of blends through that top piece there. And we can move her head, we can adjust all this. Again, there's only so much you can really adjust them because the parts are so close together. So there is some limitations there when you're going through this. Now, once you get down to the stage area, pretty much done at this point, unless you're going to color it in. And if you're printing it yourself, there's really no point in coloring it. You can add little effects to the bases. You can add little pieces there that will, kind of create your own little detail. So that's also really cool. Like this, skull, ingots, little drum, an egg, just weird random stuff. And there's even a dice, I believe, or sets of die here you can put on the base as well. Little treasure box. I believe there's a mimic somewhere that you can add to it as well. So there's a lot of cool things as tentacles, helmet. That helmet looks really small next to her. Candles, which I'm actually, one of those is going right through my foot. So if you were to print this with her attached to the base, you'd have to move her because that foot right there is going straight through the candle. And it's going to print just like that. It's not going to make any adjustments or corrections off of what you've done. You are responsible for the Q&A of this particular character. So you need to make sure that nothing is going through anything. You have to make, and again, this would be something you'd have to do if you were designing something in 3D, make sure everything looks good, right? So this is a 3D tool that you use to make a character. You have to kind of treat it the same way. You really need to look over the character very carefully when you're done to make sure that nothing is meshing. And like I said before, mounts are unavailable because this character is too tall. But otherwise, you do have an option of a couple different types of mounts. You could change the base top. You can change the base sides. You can change it from a tapered base to a rounded edge. And there's also some specialized ones and the ability to put a piece on the bottom that allows you to put it into a slotted base, which some people like to use. So that is also an option too. The XL bases down there at the bottom are all special, but they also change the character's pose. And the pose is, I think it's only a one-stage pose for that one, and you really don't have many options as far as that goes. You can also change the base's size. I believe there are 3 different options for that. Might be two or three options. And you can change the edge. You can put a little design on it. You can put a different design on it. And like I said, there's a rounded and a tapered edge for the sides of your base. Now, luckily, I have actually a pre-made saved character that I've already actually printed. And I usually scale them up about 200, 250% if I'm using them for, collectible reasons. And this particular character, like I said, I made it, I've already got it, and printed it. And I'm going to do a follow-up episode to this in about a week or two where I kind of go over the different print qualities and how they look once you actually get them off of your printer. Because people are often curious about that. Like, how do they actually look? It looks nice here, but what does it look like when you actually get the file? Now, we're going to get to that, and I'm going to show you what this file looks like in Lychee Slicer, because I wanted to go over some of the cons that I don't like. And again, when you go to buy it, you have a couple options. Different formats. The STL is the one we're looking at here. I believe it's about $8 per file, which is not super expensive, but it's not the cheapest STL. Always separate the bases because it's just the most convenient way to do it. And then you just add it to the cart and you purchase it. Usually takes about half an hour, maybe less, and you'll get the email saying your file's ready to download. You go to the download section of your account, and then you can download the character. And at that point, obviously, you have to take it into your slicer, prepare it, support it, etc. And, then you're able to run to the races at that point. Let me load up one of the characters that I had created earlier. This is I actually colored this one in too because I was having fun with it. This is one of my favorite creations here. I love this character. I actually have a printed copy on my desk and I'm about to paint it. So the color scheme was really just me playing around with colors for my painting ideas. And this character looks great. But now we pop it into the slicer And what do we see? Polys. This is probably one of the biggest issues with Hero Forge. The low poly edges are incredibly noticeable. On every curved surface, you can see those edges. And there's some fixing you can do for it. There's some workarounds, but honestly, it's terrible. They will print like that too, and you will need to finish them off yourself. Now moving over to the Eldritch Foundry, a very similar platform, but a little bit more showy as far as its UI is concerned. And honestly, it's a little heavier. I actually found that it moved a little slower, kind of pushed my browser a little bit harder than the Hero Forge one did. So if you have a slower computer or a lesser GPU, you might actually find that this one is going to work a little bit slower for you. But again, the models look great while you're editing them, and they have so many different races. You have half ogres, you have dwarves, you have I believe you can even use a hippo person. I forget the name of that, Keb or anyway. There's so many different races concerned in this, and you can go from anywhere from fantasy style to science fiction style, just like Hero Forge. They have both sides. There's the cyberpunky kind of Warhammer-ish side of that, and then there's the D&D, and fantasy side of that, Dungeons and Dragons, whatever, and whatever other tabletop games you might play, etc. So it's something to say that there's definitely options. And again, we're going to go through this the same way I went through Hero Forge to kind of compare. You can, male and female, just like Hero Forge. Very similar looking models, to be honest. The styles are almost very similar too. A lot of the accessories look really similar. Some of the weaponry looks really similar. There's, some minor details that have been, I think, refined a little bit. It feels like these guys kind of looked at Hero Forge, pulled all the features that they thought were worthy, and kind of made their own platform, because it's so similar to Hero Forge's platform, with the exception that it's just a little slower to use. It chugs a little bit rather than the other one. So you might find it a little bit slower to use. And if you're not using it on a desktop, if you're trying to use it on a tablet or something, I've actually found that it crashes quite a lot when I'm doing that. So don't recommend that. I recommend either desktop PC or laptop or something like that. Use a good browser with a good internet connection, because this is a pretty heavy application. Again, with races and genders, you have tons to choose from. There's so many different things to use, and it's really cool. I mean, they do. I think someone really thought this out and said, let's just give them as many options as possible. This one goes a little further than Hero Forge, because not only do you have your gender and race, you have something called a lineage as well, and the lineage it's almost like a cultural thing. So you have these three different styles here. For like this one particular, I believe this is a human, and we can see by changing that, it kind of changes her appearance a bit, gives her a different hairstyle, and then we can change it back, and we'll see, okay, that makes it like that. Okay, and if we choose the other one, it'll change it to an even different type of style. Again, it changes the face, changes the hair, and you get like an alternate style there. So not only do you have your initial races and gender, but then you have your lineage as well. Now you also have monstrous lineage, which is weird because it replaces their legs with one of these weird spouts. Which, I mean, I guess you could want if, that's what you're in for. I found these a little bit strange when I was playing around with this. And, yeah. Again, they have the options for amputees. You have the full arm gone. You have the elbow, stuff like that. I believe you can even attach weapons to these attachments as well, or they're options for weapons. Like that, you have a shovel. There's like a knife there. There's like a chain sword. Really kind of gnarly looking one. And yeah, those are all options for modifying the character. Now, one thing I am going to demonstrate about Eldritch Foundry that I found out is that there are certain assets that they will not let you use a digital STL file for. I don't know why. They are, I guess, premium assets, and they will actually force you to buy a physical print. So if you see an asset in the Eldritch Foundry system that has a little crown with a gold, it's like a yellow circle with a crown in it, those are special assets. You can only buy a physical file. And I'll demonstrate that towards the end of this, because I actually got stuck. And I didn't realize what was going on for a second, and I was like, oh, it's not letting me do it because of this asset. So you'll see there towards the end of this particular bit where I'm messing with Eldritch that there's a weird thing there going on. And I'm not really sure why they restricted it. It says due to some limitations or something, and I'm like, well, I mean, the only limitations I would have would be my own skill at supporting and my printer. So it's obviously limited for some other reason, probably because they want you to buy physical prints as they're quite expensive. And I'm sure they make a bit more money off their physical prints than they do off of their digital subscriptions, as it's about $10 to $15 a month. And the $10 a month option, I believe you pay annually. The $15 a month option is month to month, and you get unlimited downloads. So for $15 a month, you can literally pump out as many characters as you can possibly pump out, download all the files, keep them, and then just literally print them at your leisure, and then cancel your subscription at the end of the month. It's really not a bad deal. It's very cheap, to be honest, for that price point. Hero Forge's system works a little differently. You do have a subscription on Hero Forge where you can sign up, and you do get credits every month for digital downloads. It's not unlimited, though. This is actually offering you a lot for that. Now, I don't know if they're going to change that in the future or what. But one of the things that I did discover about Eldritch and Hero Forge is they both have similar issues when it comes to merging meshes and things bleeding through each other. So you are still going to have to do the same thing, and keep in mind that you are going to need to Q&A your file closely and make sure things do not bleed through each other, because that could happen. Again, much like Hero Forge, there are tons of hairstyles, there are tons of facial changes, there's expressions you can put on the character's face. You can make them look happy, sad, angry, kind of somewhere between. You can choose your eyebrows, your eyes. I mean, you can obviously, beards and stuff like that if you've got a character with a beard. So there's a lot of options. Again, I prefer to go with short hair because I like to try to keep the hair away from the character as much as possible. I don't want to have to worry that the character's hair is going to bleed through an object that they have on, because the hair's not going to rest on it, it's just going to go through it. And so if it doesn't look right, you're going to have to either change the hairstyle or move some things around on the character to make them look good. And so that is something that I try to avoid long hair on these characters, just for the sense of it's so much easier to not have to worry about the hair going too far down the head. So again, I'm going to go with a short hairstyle. You can mess with their eyebrows. There's not that many styles of eyebrows. There's only obviously three different versions of eyes you have there, and then all these different ears. So you do have a couple options for ears. And then, again, like I said, beards as well. So that is all there. Again, very similar to Hero Forge. These options are very, very similar. There's some additional things that Eldritch Foundry has that Hero Forge doesn't. So you might find that this is more for you. Again, you can change the facial expressions. You can make her happy. And then you can make her angry too, so she kind of looks like she's up to something, really. I mean, it's kind of neat. You can play with the face. You can open their mouth. You can close the mouth. I believe you can even adjust the angle of, the eyes, nose, cheekbones, the jaw, and the chin. And so all that, and pretty much everything is adjustable. One of the things I did really like, though, is the fact that they let you not only adjust it individually, but then you can link them and adjust them together. You can also reset them right there on the slider. And there's a neat feature of an undo also at the top as well, in case you've decided you made a couple mistakes and you want to go back a few steps. These are all great features, and I applaud Eldritch for putting these features in the software, because it actually makes it a little bit more user-friendly in that sense. So we're gonna go ahead and go through a bunch more of this, and I will try to be as verbose as possible again with the information, so you guys have a good understanding of the different aspects of the builder. Now, I'm not going to go through everything because that would honestly take far longer than this video, and this video is almost an hour as it is. It's about 57 minutes total. So I'm not even going to do the show and tell with the final prints yet because honestly, I don't want to make a 2-hour long video, and we'll just do a follow-up and show you guys the quality of some of the prints on a later video. But I really wanted to go over the platform and kind of show you guys some of the pros and a few of the cons associated with the different platforms. And one of the things I will say is with Hero Forge, I've had no problem scaling, hollowing, making them huge, and being able to print them pretty much almost any way I want to. With Eldritch, I have not had that luck yet, and I'm fairly new with Eldritch Foundry. I've really just started using this. So with my toying around, I feel like there might be something here I'm missing, but we're going to get to that in a bit, and I'll explain why I was a little bit upset by the end of this process, because after I made this entire character, my plan was to scale her up, print her, and show her off with the other one that I had already printed from Hero Forge. Unfortunately, the 3D model had other plans for me, but we'll get to that at the end. Now with the costumes, just like Hero Forge, you have a ton of different options. I love how the bird costume still keeps the hair on. That's kind of silly. Obviously, if you don't want it, you can delete the object from the character, and that will remove it. I believe you can also hover over the tab and choose the delete icon, and it will delete anything that they're wearing. So pretty much if you hover over outfits and click delete, you're just going to have a naked character. Well, they're not naked. I mean, they look like Barbie dolls. Again, choose carefully with the clothing options and make sure that the objects do not blend through each other, because you're not going to be able to adjust it much once you've actually purchased the file. Now, if you're purchasing these individually, which you can, they are $5 each, so a little tiny bit cheaper than Hero Forge. If you're doing a monthly plan, like I said, $15 or $10 a month. There is a third plan, which I haven't messed with or looked at very much, and that's a different option altogether. The annual plan is, I believe, it's $10 a month. You pay it up front. It's $120 for the year. You get unlimited creations and downloads for the year. So pretty cool deal, because $120 is going to get you, I don't know, endless amounts of STL files that you can create. But you're stuck creating them in the format and the way that they have them. And I'm going to get to why that's not necessarily the best thing at the end of this, because, again, there's some issues here with the actual STL file that I experienced that kind of made me go back down the road of, well, this is very similar to what I already experienced with Hero Forge, but I'm even having a harder time with this one because of some other issues. Again, tons of accessories. You have neck accessories, you have back accessories, shoulder, there's capes, there's eyewear. Again, lots of options. Now, do keep an eye out for any of those items that do contain that yellow icon with a crown. And we haven't seen any yet, but we're going to eventually. Some special items do tend to have that icon, and I think it's just based on the fact that these are select items that they don't want you to be able to either have an STL for yourself for yet, or it's just an item that maybe they feel like it's too complex to print. I have no idea what the reasoning is. As a professional 3D printer, I don't think there's any problems with any of the things that I saw that had this icon on it. But for some reason, I was restricted, and it did not let me actually create the STL file with one of these attributes, which was an actual functional base that had some other details on it, which you'd use as it's like a functional base essentially. And we'll get to that in a little bit. Again, you can add capes, cool capes. I mean, there's lots of neat options here. You can swap between the different styles, but again, just make sure that whatever you're using isn't bleeding through anything, because the capes, I find, are probably the biggest culprits for this. Apart from weapons on your character's back or maybe a shield, you're going to find weird issues with those where they'll kind of go through an arm or something like that. So just be cautious when you're placing the capes. and make sure, like that skull right there just goes right through the clothing. So that would be something you'd want to adjust if you can. Again, I played around with the cape adjustments on this particular one, and it doesn't really give you a whole lot of options as far as moving the entire thing. Again, eyewear, you can put a mask on them. Kind of looks like a superhero, I guess. There's other ones too. You got like weird 3D glasses looking things. You got like Splinter Cell looking like three lenses there on that one. You got eye patches. I believe you can also give yourself a black eye. There's a monocle. Yeah, so I mean, you got a lot of options for the face as far as accessories. Now, the weapons are cool. I did actually go through quite a lot of these, and there are some neat looking weapons. And see, there we go. Now, this is a reason to undo, because I accidentally put a weapon in the wrong hand. That was the one that we had that amputee blade going on, and I want to keep that. I actually like that. So we're gonna put a weapon in the other hand. That was my bad. So we'll go ahead and click that, and you'll see it'll place the weapon in her hand, and pretty good detail on the weapons. Really do like them. They look nice. There's some really nicely detailed ones too. There's like hammers and bows and all sorts of stuff. Even ray guns and things like that. The wheelbow kind of reminds me of some things I see in science fiction or science fantasy, kind of mixed. So those are cool items too. Again, pick your weapons, pick your items, put them on the character, put them in their hand. You can also decide to put them on their side if you don't want to actually have them in their hands. You can adjust the position of them. You can adjust the position of the arms, just like you do in Hero Forge. It's a very similar system. It looks a little different when you play around with it, but for the most part, it works very much the same, whereas you can kind of pose the arms and move them around to give yourself a better orientation for the particular body parts, especially if you want to make them look more natural, like they're in a more resting position or an attacking position, or however you want to do it. See, there's one of those items right there with that little yellow icon and the gold and the little crayon. And we can use them, but as soon as we do, it's going to take away my ability to do a digital download. And I'll get to that at the end once we go over the final bit there. You can use big, heavy weapons. I don't even know how she'd be holding that with one hand, but cool. Stronger than me. There's a little hammer there that kind of looks like Thor's hammer. I like that one. Might let her keep that one. You got gauntlets, you got shields, you have magic. You can apply magic, you can put a spell in their hand. You can put an eagle in their hand. There's also musical instruments, a head, like the head of like a beast. That's pretty cool. So, again, tons of options. Even more so, I think, in some cases than what Hero Forge has available. So I applaud them on that. The menu of options is vast. There's nothing wrong with that. The issue that I take with it is when you get to the end. And again, we'll cover that in a little bit. You can give them instruments, like I said. You can put instruments on their back. You can put shields on their back. Now, again, with a cape, that's probably not going to work. So I don't advise it. Those two objects are definitely going to have a hard time being friendly with each other. You can put a sword on your back, which personally I think they're huge. That sword's almost as tall as her. You can put a staff or a bow. I mean, the bow's almost as tall as her. Actually, I think the bow is a bit taller than her. It's kind of crazy, actually. But yeah, there's room for, if you have room for it and you want to put something on their back, there's that option. You can put, all sorts of stuff. You can also put stuff on their side, like I was showing in the Hero Forge example. You could put a knife on their side or something like that. This is very similar to that. You can do the same thing. You can even have a jetpack. There are some other accessories which I found kind of interesting. There's like potions and scroll casings and things like that. And for the most part, the default position for most of them sits right on the belt. It's pretty convenient, works pretty well. Didn't really have to move or adjust any of those too much when I played around with this. There are some other miscellaneous items. You've got some skulls you can hang from your belt. Other weird things like a conductor's wand, which I didn't quite understand. There's a whip. And other weapons like little throwing knives. The whip is kind of bulky and goes through the cape, as you can see there, so I didn't really like that too much. I mean, you could adjust the cape, obviously, to fix that. But, I mean, there you go. Even that dagger kind of goes right through the cape. So you can see how capes tend to be a big issue when you're using capes. You really have to adjust them to make sure that the other items on the character don't go through them. And you can put a little book there, whatever you decide. I mean, again, the creativity level is your imagination. But unlike Hero Forge, there are some items here, like I said, those yellow iconed items, which there aren't a lot of them, but they're there, that they will not let you digital STL. I don't really fully understand. I've actually contacted Eldritch Foundry about this, and I'm waiting for some feedback as to why that might be. So we'll see what the reasoning behind that is. I didn't quite understand it. So again, the poses are almost identical to Hero Forge. I think they have a few, maybe like one or two less, but they're nearly identical. A lot of them are almost the same. They're missing some of the weird poses, but a lot of them are the same. Like there's no sitting pose. The 80 plus one actually made me laugh because it looks like a dude that's holding his back like he hurt himself. And I laughed and I said, oh, that's me. But I'm not 80 plus. So, I feel like it some days. And obviously, again, if you make a couple mistakes and you want to go back a little bit, don't forget about that undo button. That thing is going to save your butt many, many times because you're going to be able to go backwards and just undo some steps rather than having to like delete them or go back and figure, oh, I didn't like this, I didn't like that, and individually kind of remove the bits. Now, as you see, I changed the hand position and it got rid of my eagle because that particular, I believe the eagle requires the hand to be in a certain position or in, I guess, a certain type, or maybe it needs to be clenched. I haven't quite figured out if that was the case with this, but again, you can try to adjust it a little bit. So you can go into each one of these: head, body, arms, cape, weapons, etc., items, bases, and then you can start adjusting. Now, very much like Hero Forge, you have different adjust sliders there. And rather than telling you, oh, it's like tilt this, whatever, there's a little geometrical box there with a little arrow pointing in the direction that you'd be adjusting. And this, obviously the side and the arrow direction telling you which way you're adjusting. So it's a little bit weirder when you look at it at first, but it pretty much works the same. So keep that in mind. There's also a way to scale items as well. In some cases, you can make them smaller. So if, like I said, that dagger that was huge or the whip that seemed a little too big for my character's hand, you can adjust the size of some of those items. Not everything. So there are some other options there. When you are ready, in this particular sense, the difference between this and Hero Forge when you're ready to go is you, again, add it to cart just like them. And what they're going to tell you is essentially you're going to get 3 different files. You're going to get the character, the base, and then both of them unified. So it gives you the option of actually having both without even you having to say it. Hero Forge does not do that. So that is a plus, in my opinion. And again, I guess it depends, how you want to do it. Some people like printing them off the base. I personally hate it. So for me, I like the option of being able to do both. And some people, they might want that too. And I think it's convenient that they actually give you all of the files rather than making you choose and then sticking you with one or the other forever. I mean, in Hero Forge, once you've made the character, it's done. You can go back and edit it, but you're going to have to pay for another version of that same character. So it seems a little duplicitous. And I really wish that they would kind of go the route of giving you both the separated and the actual attached character. I think that would, in my opinion, would be a nice touch to the Hero Forge platform and actually make it just a little bit better. And Eldritch doing this actually kind of was like, oh, well, that's neat. How come they do that? Hero Forge doesn't do it. But again, it's obviously the way the systems were designed. Everybody has their own taste. Everybody has their own method. And obviously, I'm opting to just remove this cape because it's annoying and just meshing through objects. So we're going to get rid of the cape. And we're going to go back to our back items. And again, now that we don't have a cape, we can look at things that we can throw on her back. So in this particular instance, I think I'm going to put a sheath back there, or a weapon rather, so that way it actually looks like she's armed aside from just, the blade that she has attached to her actual arm. Or you can just throw a shield on the back. Again, look at the shield, the way it's colliding with the arm. So be conscious of that. Again, just like Hero Forge, you have to be conscious of the collision. That is something that could always potentially be an issue for you. All right, we're going to get back to finishing this up, and then I'm going to show you exactly what happens when you try to do an STL file with one of those weird special items. So the base I chose is a conditional one. And all the conditional bases are these special yellow crown icons. I don't know what makes this special, and it says due to mechanical limitations, and I'm like, what mechanical limitations? I'm guessing it's something on their end that they're not able to, I guess, make that part of the file. I don't really understand what that is about, but I actually have written them about that particular question, and I'm curious as to see what they actually have to say about the reason for that limitation. There's no mechanical limitation on my end. I have no problem printing that base on my printers. I don't know if that's a glitch or what, but as you can see, it changed it to the high detail resin, and you cannot change it back. It will not let you change it. So we're going to go ahead and skip out of this, and I'm going to come back with a character that I'm going to remodel a little bit off of this one, and I'll show you guys the finished piece. There she is. This is kind of based on the one we worked on, but again, what do you guys notice? See those polys? Yeah, just like Hero Forge, the model does not look as good once it is exported as an STL. Those polys, I mean, the flame looks a little better than the armor, but the surface of the armor is absolutely low poly. The fingers have visible polys on them. The sword, the shoulder pad, and pretty much everything except for the face. Even if you were printing at 35 to 20 microns on a 12K printer, which Anycubic literally, I think, is just releasing the first one with the M5S, you're going to notice these lines. In fact, the higher the resolution, the more you're going to notice these polys. I have printed many Hero Forge characters, and this same issue persists there. Now, there are some Blender tricks you can use. I believe you can even Mesh Mixer, bring the files in, and you can play around with them. But one of my other problems is that you can't hollow these. There is some deficiency going on, and again, I have reached out to Eldritch support on this because it hollows some parts, like her head and that flame in her hand, but nothing else. The entire torso, the legs, everything, even though they are fully wide enough to be hollowed at the size that she is, because she's about, I want to say almost 11 centimeters at that height. She's about 117 millimeters. And that's all the way up to the tip of the sword. But still, it's a decent enough size. Even if I were to minus that, she's probably about 8 centimeters tall, and it just does not want to hollow. I have attempted doing the hollowing several different ways. I brought her into Microsoft 3D Builder, hollowed it that way. The hollowing was still very inefficient. It did not want to hollow everything. Now, at a smaller scale, the scale that they're supposed to be, you can still see all those very, very terrible polylines. And look at the base. The base detail is perfect, except for the skull I threw onto it. And that you can see the polylines. And I don't really truly understand why the model that I'm looking at in the builder looks so fantastic, but then when I download the STL, you get this. Now, this is my problem with both Hero Forge and Eldritch now, so they both seemingly have the same issue, and I have to assume it must be the limitations of technology. Or they simply would prefer you buy physical prints, and so the low poly version is simply what you get for what you pay for. And honestly, for the cost, I suppose it's not a terrible thing. As you can see here, this will not hollow. That's actually a hollowed model, but it's not actually hollow. Anyway, folks, a takeaway from this, honestly, is that you have a couple options when it comes to character creators out there. Hero Forge is very good for what it costs. Eldritch is a little bit cheaper. They both have some of the same cons. The low poly counts on the final STL files. Some of the, weird exclusivity items and things like that just don't work with each other. The collision issues. They all have those issues. So as far as an open comparison to say which one's better, I'm going to honestly say I don't think either one kind of beat the other one out in this particular case. Hero Forge has been around a little bit longer as far as I know, and Eldritch is fairly new on the market, and I think they have a bit more growing to do before they're really ready to ramp this up. They don't have merchant availability yet. Hero Forge, I think, still doesn't offer merchant availability. So at least Eldritch is kind of thinking outside the box a little bit there. But at the same time, these issues with the low poly, the non-hollowing, and some of the other, things that you have to kind of remember, like I said, the collision issues, would be nice if the software would at least tell you or perhaps highlight the item that's colliding so you can kind of see, oh, there's collision here. If you don't care, if it looks okay, fine, you can leave it alone. But for the amount of times I've heard people exporting these STLs and there's something colliding with something else that just looks awful, well, I mean, that's an issue obviously that needs to be addressed. But personally, my biggest takeaway from this is that they really need to make these polygons. The poly count on the actual STL file needs to be a bit higher. 3D printing requires very smooth objects. And the problem is that these aren't smooth. You're literally going to spend a good 30, 40 minutes sanding away at this character to smooth out their details. Otherwise, when you go to paint it, you're literally going to see little edge lines as you paint that surface, because that is going to be deep enough on those edges there that you're going to notice these polylines when you look at the final printed piece. And I have printed enough Hero Forge characters to actually see that in example. Anyway, guys, that's it for this episode. I'm planning on doing a follow-up because I want to actually get these Eldritch characters that I'm making right now printed so I can kind of show you the comparison of the physical product. Now, again, I don't buy the physical prints from Hero Forge and I don't buy the physical prints from Eldritch Foundry. But for those of you that might be out there that have, share your comments on it. If you bought the physical prints from any of these folks, did they look like they had polylines on them? And if so, I mean, I don't really feel that that's acceptable in my opinion. Most STL files that I download and purchase, or even the ones that we use with our merchants, are smooth, high poly counts made for 3D printing. As far as I'm concerned, the low poly count means that these really are not truly made for 3D printing. You really want higher poly counts. You want to be able to smooth those areas out. And like I said, there are some tricks in Blender and other 3D softwares that you can use, but you shouldn't have to go through all that extra work just to make sure that the surfaces are smooth. If y'all like this episode, please leave us a like. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell for notifications on episodes like this one. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good one.